Trade talks are really starting to pick up surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs as a brand new report from Friedman has dropped revealing some new Leafs targets. We're going to break down that report and discuss what this means going forward as Brad Treliving is preparing for something big. But before we get into that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. If you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button. About 70% of you who are watching aren't subscribed. We're on the road to 16,000 subscribers. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. And again, bear with the camera quality. I'm in Toronto and I'm wearing a jacket because I'm cold. Yes, I have heat. I'm just a little bit chilly right now. But let's dive right into it, Darius. There's a lot to go over today. And the name that has been dropped is Luke Kunin, and he is a name that the Leafs could consider targeting. He has 11 goals, 2.75 million cap hit and he is a UFA this summer, can play multiple positions, and is the type of player that Craig Berube and Brad Treliving would like. However, it's noted that the Leafs would prefer to add somebody with terms. We're going to dive into Luke a lot in this specific video, and it's an interesting player, one we haven't spoken about it, and when Friedman drops names like this that are a bit more obscure than some of the other names, it obviously makes you have a double take and think that this is a guy Brad Treliving is absolutely targeting. Not only that, Brad Treliving is more inclined to target somebody with term, but in this case, he doesn't have term, which is very interesting. But also on the flip side, he doesn't cost a lot for the Leafs.
No, he doesn't cost a lot, and he might not cost a lot going forward. And I don't know, I've heard it pronounced Kunin or Kunin, right? So for this video, we'll just go with Kunin, I guess. But he's a pretty good player on a pretty bad team, right? Like a good depth player that I think would be a sneaky pickup for the Leafs in this way. And I really, he was completely off of my radar. We've been talking a lot about, the hot commodities like the Scott Laughtons of the world and all these guys that'll probably be moved to one team or another at the trade deadline. But then Friedman comes out with this bomb and he's like, hey, maybe they're looking at a player like this. And, again, could be a sneaky deal. He doesn't make a lot against the cap. Yes, he's a free agent this year, but it's not like he is a Evgeny Malkin or something like that, where he's going to become a free agent, maybe walk and demand like $8 million or something like that. That's not the case here. You can easily re-sign a player like this. And he could be a very interesting depth option there on the third line. This is another guy like maybe a Brandon Tanev that, could come in, play in different roles and fill a role for you on the third line. So it is very interesting. And I think that they're clearly doing their due diligence. They're kicking tires on almost everybody at this point, because I think a trade, is coming sooner rather than later at this point. I think they're going to want to try and make one before the actual trade deadline.
Yeah, obviously. The trade deadline in the NHL is late, so the further along you get as you approach the deadline, the less time they have to get acclimated with their team. Now, he said in the 32 thoughts, Luke Kunin could be a good target for the Leafs. Kunin has 11 goals, makes $2.75 million, is a UFA this summer, and he fought after Nashville made 3-0 in the first period yesterday, and Treliving's been interested in him before. Now, with Luke Kunin, the interesting thing would be if they decide to, like you mentioned, with players that have this smaller cap hit and aren't as established in the league as, super high goal scorers or, obviously high point players, the Leafs should be able to retain any of these guys that they get now, depending if they make the budget for it, all these different things. You do have Mitch Marner, or you do have John Tavares, sorry, you have some of these other guys. So as you start to look at, space, he is a UFA this summer, but everything goes well. Granted, obviously, Luke would have to want to come here as well. And this is the interesting thing, though. You look at the JFresh chart, and it is one of the worst you'll see in the NHL. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this, Darius, because Leafs fans are kind of split on this report. Like, if you get him for super cheap, it could be a depth piece. His projected time on ice is a third liner. He would be a third line, probably center for the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially given their need for that. The problem is the advanced analytics have really hated him thus far this season, whether it be offensively, defensively. Now, he does play with the San Jose Sharks. He signed a one-year, $2.75 million deal there. But when you're looking at the JFresh chart, which isn't a be-all, end-all chart here, it is really rough. But you also have this from people who obviously watch Sharks hockey more. He said anyone talking poor about Kunin this season doesn't know hockey. Said it, dropped it, not picking it up. So people who are actually watching the game are saying that he's been a solid player for that Sharks. Whereas you look at it, and for people who don't watch as much Sharks hockey, you're probably thinking from the the advanced analytics point of view, at least, that he's having an atrocious season.
And the advanced analytics are there as a tool, and I love to use them because they can tell a story at times. Although this one is a little bit older. This is when he signed his contract originally. But the San Jose Sharks are not a good team. Advanced analytics don't like bad teams, right? And the role that he's playing, they have some decent players there, like Macklin Celebrini, right? That is putting in good minutes and actually top of the league in certain categories. But he's not playing with them, right? He's playing a depth option as a depth option on a bad team. They are a bad team. So I would like to see him, what he can do as a depth option on a good team and what he can bring in terms of a skill set to a good team like the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, as of late, like that one tweet said, again, the JFresh chart is from when he signed that contract. Like the tweet said, recently, he's been playing really well. He's been hot recently. He's been scoring. He fought last night or 2 nights ago. And Obviously, he's been putting in some pretty good work with the Sharks, but again, the advanced analytics, they won't look good for a player on a bad team, especially playing a depth role. So again, cap hit's pretty cheap. Even if you retain salary, you don't have to give up that much if you want to go that route. This is a very interesting option. He can play center for you. This is exactly kind of what they're looking for in terms of obviously depth option. The only thing is, I don't see this guy being a guy that can take matchups away from Matthews and Marner, which is kind of what they've been describing. That's the only thing I don't see, but I can see him as an interesting depth option that can play on both sides of the ice. And I would like to see what he can do on a really good team. And it's low risk at the end of the day, too. A lot of these other guys we're talking about, like Yanni Gourde, he comes with a large cap hit. You know what you're getting out of him, more so in that role. But obviously, you're going to have to make some things work for him. So I think it's very interesting. And again, I think they're just considering all their options at this point.
Yeah, and if you're unfamiliar with Luke Kunin's stats so far, after watching a lot of Sharks games, he actually has 18 points. So he has 18 points in 51 games, 11 goals. He just turned 27, so it's not like he's an older player or anything like that. He's actually a younger guy. So, I mean, younger given some of the other targets that the Leafs have been looking at going after. So it's a very interesting target, very interesting report from Friedman there. And you look at again, his stats are interesting. His cap hit here, $2.75 million. That's the big thing with him. Obviously, just turned 27. And when you look at some of the other targets that have been rumored, Yanni Gourde, Luke Kunin, Nick Bustad, Ryan McLeod, Fasca, all these different guys, and we haven't had a video on Radek Fasca or any of these, him. But you're talking about Yanni Gourde, of course, we had a video on him. It's really a matter of weighing the positives versus the negatives for these guys, whether it be term, whether it be age, and of course cap hit, current and future cap hit. Whether we've obviously talked about guys like JT Miller, but guys who are under a term, you also have to play into the amount of money they're going to be making over the next few seasons, which is a very interesting one. But speaking of Ryan McLeod, he's another guy that has been on the Leafs' radar, who is a restricted free agent after this year, is 25 as well, plays center. What are your thoughts on this one, Darius? This is another interesting player. There's so many options for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've been pursuing so many guys. It's a matter of picking one or picking the best one for this team given the acquisition cost.
I don't know if the Buffalo Sabres are going to want to give up this player. There's a reason they traded for him. I think the Edmonton Oilers getting rid of this guy was a huge mistake. Again, he doesn't have term past this season, but he does have control. He's an RFA after this season. His cap hit is basically nothing. You can make that work. He can play third line center for you. He is fast. He can play. He's very good defensively, actually very underrated defensively. And he's gone to a Stanley Cup final last year. He has that experience. So another guy I've been talking about, it's good to bring in guys who have that experience, know how to get it done and what it's like to go on that journey. So I think that's another very interesting option. I think he's faster than Kunin, right? Like he can add more than a guy like Kunin can to this lineup, I think. But again, I don't see the Buffalo Sabres really wanting to get rid of him, but the Leafs can try and make it work. The Sabres are not going to make the playoffs this year. It just depends on how they envision him in the team, beyond this season. So it's going to be interesting, but that'd be another guy I'd be targeting. Like he's quick. He can play well defensively. He's another guy that can maybe take a bit of the matchup game. He played well for the Oilers last year in that third line center role as well. So they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So I think it's another interesting option that they should be looking at.
Yeah, let us know about your thoughts on that and who would you prefer out of Kunin and McLeod. And again, we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest Leafs news, so make sure to smash that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.